guys, it's ayebeepeee and welcome back to my channel. And I know my uploading has not been consistent lately, but I'm just going to be honest, the end of the semester is kicking my butt. So we will see each other when we see each other. Hopefully we'll get back on track soon. And today we're doing a talking CJ, and we are talking about the bystander effect. You don't just learn about the bystander effect in criminal justice, you actually learn about it in psychology too. But before we get into the definition of what the bystander effect is, I really want to go into a case that helped define it. There was a woman named Catherine Genovese, and she went by Kitty. She was 28 years old. On Friday, March 13th, 1964, she was trying to get home after being out that night. The New York Times reported she was attacked by a man later identified as Winston Mosley. He stabbed her at about 3:20 a.m. Kitty was calling for help at this point, but no one in the apartment building helped her. And finally, at 3:50 a.m., a nearby person finally called 911 for her. His name was Robert Moser, and he yelled out the window to leave her alone, which did cause the attacker to leave and Kitty trying to get into her apartment to be safe. The attacker, though, came back 10 minutes later and stabbed this woman again. He raped her and stole her money in the entrance of her apartment building. And the New York Times reported that there were 38 people that saw this attack and did nothing. And they also reported that talking to these 38 people, they just assumed it was a fight between a couple and they just didn't want to get involved. And they just didn't realize that he was murdering her. They thought they were just fighting. So there was a parasocial psychologist who just thought this was insane. Why did this happen? Why was there 38 people that witnessed this happen and nobody do anything about it? So in 1968, they started to perform multiple experiments to try to figure out why there could be such a massive group of people and nobody feel the need to save this woman's life. As one of the experiments, they staged an emergency, and researchers measured how long it took for someone to do anything to help, if they did at all. And all these experiments easily prove that if there was a larger group of people, no one ever really did anything to help or react to the situation. And the social psychologists that were doing these experiments were named John Darley and Bibb Latany, and they assumed there was 5 characteristics to situations that affect bystanders. So the first one is emergencies usually have a threat of harm or actual harm happening. Emergencies are unusual and rare. The type of action that a bystander would have to partake in really depends on the emergency. Emergencies cannot be predicted or expected, and emergencies require immediate action. Something that was interesting in both males and females being bystanders is they go through cognitive and behavioral processes before reacting. They first notice that something is going on, and the way that Latany and Darley tested this was the students of Columbus University that participated in this would be placed in a room. Now they'd either be placed in there alone with 2 strangers or 3 strangers, and their goal was to complete a questionnaire. Smoke was pumped through a vent in this room to try to simulate that there was a fire. 75% of the participants reported the smoke when they were all alone, and they reacted up to 5 seconds from when the smoke started. But if they were in the groups, it did take them longer to either notice or report the smoke. And sometimes it took up to 20 minutes for anybody to report it. And if there were 2 other people in the room, about 38% would report the smoke. But if there was 3, only about 10% reported it. Latany and Darley decided that this is coming from the social norms of how we act in public with each other. In most Western cultures, it's actually rude to be looking around and not seeming engaged in conversation with people, or in your our group. We think of it as being nosy or kind of rude if someone's just staring at us in public wondering what we're doing, which means even if you notice anything, most of the time you don't want people to realize you notice. So a lot of situations go unreported because of this. And especially if you're in a larger group, the statistics go way down on how many people report compared to if they were alone and saw something. Okay, so another cognitive and behavioral process we go through is actually interpreting whether the situation is an emergency. Usually the situation that's going on could be really crazy or really hard to interpret what exactly is happening. And this is why we rely so much on others' reactions. So if nobody else is reacting to a situation, we don't feel like we should be reacting because we don't exactly understand what the emergency is. And that also brings us to, once we do notice something's going on, a lot of the time people have to be encouraged to even do anything. And that goes along with, if nobody else is doing anything to help, that encourages us to not do anything either. Now let's think back to the smoke experiment. And when the students were in the groups instead of being alone, they still would hardly report the smoke, even when it was so thick that it was causing them to cough and not be able to breathe well and have physical reactions. So then Darlie and Latney decided, we're going to do another experiment that helps us figure out how people react to maybe non-emergency situations. And so there was a study done in 2006 that would test if people did react differently to non-emergencies. So again, when you're alone, you will offer help almost immediately, way more than when you're around another person or people. But when it comes to emergencies, almost the same amount of people that were alone and people that were in a group would help. So it was a lot more even across the board with emergencies. So another cognitive and behavioral process we have to go through in our head is, what degree of responsibility do we feel to this situation? And Darlie and Latney found that there were 3 different factors that helped us decide how responsible we feel to this situation as a bystander. One thing is, do we feel these victims deserve help? The competence of the bystander itself, and the relationship between the bystander and the victim. Do you know them? Do you not know them? Are they a significant other, a best friend, someone you just know from high school? And those 3 things really help us determine if we're going to do anything. And another little side note they found in these studies was that if the bystander felt like people were watching them or expecting them to help, they usually helped quite a bit more than when they could fade into the background. Your 4th process you go through is forming assistance. Latney and Darlie found that there was 2 different types of assistance that we go for. Direct intervention, which is directly helping the victim, going right to them, saying what they need. And then there's detour intervention, which is like calling 911, reporting it to the authorities, finding someone else to help, something that's not necessarily interacting with the victim. The next process we go through is implementing the decision we have made. What action are we getting into? Timothy Hart and Turnus Mahi, sorry if I butchered your name, used the National Crime Victimization Survey to gather some data to prove what types of crimes actually were more likely to be helped in. Bystanders will take action for about 68% of physical altercations. This counts robberies being at 49%, sexual assaults, which is 28%, and half of the attacks that the bystanders would step in for were usually in the evening time or going into night. And the victim and bystander were strangers. They had no connection to each other at all. And with all this research that was done, that is how they came to this theory of the bystander effect. And the social psychological theory that they came up with was that people were less likely to offer help if they were with a group or anyone else other than when they were with themselves. This is also known as bystander apathy or the Genovese syndrome. Once this came out, there was a lot of experiments done from others to really dig in deep to this theory. And after all this research that was done, they found that there was many factors that favored this theory. The number of bystanders, which we've pretty much exhausted at this point. They found ambiguity as being one of the factors also. With high ambiguity, it takes people about 5 times longer to do anything than in low ambiguity situations. This is because we really go through the mindset before we take action of, is this dangerous to us? How is it going to harm me? And we really have to take that time to think before we react usually. We also at this point go through in our head, is it an emergency situation? Kind of like we've already talked about. And of course the environment that you're in really affects whether you react or not. If you are unfamiliar with the location, you're more likely not to react, even in an emergency situation. But if the person is familiar with the environment, they're more likely to know when to get help, where to get help, where the exits are, and information that can make them feel more comfortable to offer assistance. Another factor is group cohesiveness. And this was a lot of studies more focusing on the group aspect on why people react or not react in these situations. And it proved that if someone in the group was a victim, they were more likely to help than if their group just witnessed an emergency or something like that. Because you feel entitled to keep the people that you are with safe. And another factor is the diffusion of responsibility. Most people just assume there is someone around them that can help better than them. I think most people assume that if they're in any type of facility that has a little bit more than like 10 people, probably someone's a nurse, or maybe there's a police officer, firefighter, something that would be trained in maybe CPR or something along those lines of being able to aid more than just an average person who doesn't have that knowledge or have studied in those career paths. So to them, it's those people that should be helping the victim because they know more than the normal person. And also people just might not be reading a situation well. Maybe they're completely off and that there is harm that's going to be done, but they just didn't notice it. And a lot of people also are concerned that they're going to be giving unwarranted help, that they don't want help, and that they're actually just being more of a burden than doing anything that could benefit this victim. But people believe in emergency situations that they could be held accountable if they do something that could cause more harm when they're just trying to help, or be held responsible to whatever happens because they tried to help. And that is really where we saw the birth of like Good Samaritan laws. And there are quite a few states that will not punish you if something terribly wrong happens after you're literally just trying to give help. But Good Samaritan laws also hold you accountable to helping people in situations like this instead of just assuming someone else is going to do it. You can also diffuse responsibility when you have a victim asking a certain person for help. Well, that person's not me, so I'm not going to do anything. But if you are that one person that's asked for help, you feel that you're more likely to react and help this person. And if a group is asked to do something, it is shown that people try to do the least amount possible in the group to help this victim. The responsibility is just so split between however many people are in the group that you really don't feel complete responsibility to help. I did want to put in here for transparency that the New York Times later admitted to reporting a lot of inaccuracies in the Kitty Genovese case. They reported the wrong number of victims. It was not 38. I think it was more like 10. And that guy did yell at the victim. So someone did try to help. Someone called 911. There was another one. And they made it seem like she was out in the open, and that just really wasn't the case. She was walking, I think, in between buildings when the first attack happened. So that is how a few people could see her from the window. But when she was attacked the second time, she was in the entrance to her apartment, which was actually pretty hidden. So not many people at all could have seen her in the time that he sexually assaulted her and killed her. So there's still to this day studies being done on the bystander effect, especially since this Kitty Genovese case was completely reported wrong. So you see a shift where people are more likely just watching security footage of emergencies and things like that instead of staging them to get more of a normal reaction. And video surveillance prove that bystanders would help victims in like assaults or violent crimes 91% of the time. And it was also proven that the more people that saw it was more likely of a chance they were going to react. So clearly we're either seeing a rise of generations feeling the responsibility to help in situations, or these studies have been flawed for a while. So ways you can be an active bystander is just not assuming somebody has to act before you. Just go ahead right in and offer a hand. Also, don't assume that somebody else is going to help. You need to take the responsibility to be there for victims. And also, don't try to worry on whether it's an emergency or non-emergency. Just treat it as such, and if there's no help that's needed, they will let you know. And if you are a victim, a way to make sure that there's not 38 people standing around watching your crime and not doing anything is to single out one person around you. That'll make them feel the responsibility is theirs to help you. Make eye contact. Talk directly to them. It makes it really hard for someone to turn you down. And that is all I found on the bystander effect. Please leave your comments below on what you think of it, and also any ideas for any other talking CJs that you'd have. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, please go watch my Unsolved in West Virginia series, because season 2 is coming up really soon actually. So you're going to want to be caught up on that one before we get into the second series. Also, please like and subscribe for me, and hit that notification button. That way you're notified the next time I upload. And thank you guys again. I'll see you next time. Bye.